Let's move on to H7, outside consultant or expert to study energy storage systems, ESS, beginning on page 255. Our next item is to review and discuss discussion on identifying and retaining an outside consultant or expert to study energy storage systems. The consultant would review, among other things, information received to date, installation issues, including safety concerns and appropriate contractor classifications to install energy storage systems. Additionally, this item also for the board to provide general guidance about the scope of the consultant's report and discuss estimated cost parameters. The board has been asked to consider retaining an outside consultant beginning at the bottom of page 257. Staff have included the general parameters for the board's consideration. The general parameters were developed based on the committee members' discussion on November 7th, 2019, Legislative Committee meetings. What follows is the range of the cost of the study, which staff estimate to be between $20,000 and $100,000, and the timeline. The timeline for hiring a consultant to issuance of the study is approximately 8 to 10 months. If it is determined that regulations are needed, it would be an additional 18 months. The total time frame is approximately 2 years. While this time frame is much longer than I envisioned, I would expect staff to work closely with the Department of Consumer Affairs to expedite the process. Before I turn this over to board members for discussion, I would like to first turn it over to our Legislative Committee Chair, Augie Beltran, to explain why the Legislative Committee rescinded its prior motion and decided to pass a motion to recommend to the full board that it directs staff to hire a consultant. Augie?
Thank you, Chair. At our November 7th, 2019 meeting, the Leg Committee made a motion to recommend to the full board that staff retain an outside consultant to study energy storage system, ESS, information received, and ESS installation issues, including safety concerns and appropriate contractor classifications to install ESS. We made this recommendation because after numerous public meetings that afforded the opportunity to over 300 people to testify, it was evident that the CSLB should conduct further study of the issue for the following reasons. 1, regarding public safety issues, both sides of the issue differed widely on the present and potential for risk to workers or consumers in the installation of this technology by certified electricians versus solar installers. 2, the committee has also discussed the need to obtain more information regarding complexity and size of battery or energy storage systems. 3, building officials have additionally expressed concern regarding code compliance that deserves further consideration. And finally, regarding economic issues, both sides of the issue submitted economic impact studies that reached drastically conflicting conclusions about the proposed impact to the marketplace amending the C46 classification. One side of the issue concluded there will be no economic impact, while the other side believes that the impact could be over $90 million. As much as it appreciates, I don't know if that's written right, as much as we appreciate staff's study and efforts to achieve a resolution to this matter over the months, the Leg Committee determined that an outside consultant would be more helpful in reviewing all the information received or any need for possible additional information. In a report that will result in an independent analysis before the board consideration of these issues, it seemed to the Leg Committee that before the board can make a sound and fair decision, an independent third party or parties should research the issues and come back with recommendations for the board's considerations. That's our report.
Thank you, Mr. Beltran. Next, I'd like Mike Melzia to explain the contracting process before we turn it over to the board for questions.
Thank you, Chair. The state contracting process is complex. Today, I'll do my best to touch on the key elements of hiring a consultant and be available to answer board member questions. For background, the Department of Consumer Affairs has delegation authority for all contracts and ensures conformity with the public contracting codes and policies and procedures of our control agency, the Department of General Services. When developing a contract, DCA will work with CSLB staff to ensure all procurement and evaluation procedures are conducted legally and consistent with state procurement policy, prepare and write contracts in a manner that safeguards CSLB and DCA, develop, review, provide feedback, and finalize acquisition documents, act as the liaison to DGS, the procurement division over there, and the DGS Office of Legal Services if necessary, and obtain any required approvals from the DGS. There could be different contract mechanisms for securing a consultant. It could be through an existing DCA contract, through an existing statewide contract, or going through the request for proposal solicitation process through the Department of General Services. The contracting method will be determined based on the scope of work. So among the many elements, CSLB must start with a clear scope of work, statement of work. The more thoroughly CSLB communicates its specific needs, requirements, goals, and objectives, the quicker we can determine what contract mechanism we could use to secure a consultant. The handout provided to you details examples of what is contained in a scope and statement of work. Today, should the board choose to move forward with pursuing the services of a consultant, staff will need input from the board on general parameters. Based on the direction received today, CSLB staff will work with DCA's contracts unit to finalize the scope and all other elements of the proposal to ensure all contract requirements are met. During the scope of work development phase, there will be numerous back and forth discussions and revisions taking place before it is finalized. Currently, we estimate the time frame for hiring a consultant to issuance of a study is approximately 8 to 10 months. The time needed to complete a bid proposal process will depend on the type of contracting method used, the complexity of the services required, the number of bids or proposals received, among other factors. Next, I wanted to touch briefly on why the cost range is broad, where we have estimated it ranging between $20,000 to $100,000. That's actually been explained on page 258 of your agenda. So we just looked at other similar type contracts and came up with that range, $20,000 to $100,000. Back to the RFP process. As I mentioned, there's different methods for awarding a contract. In an RFP process, it is determined, there's two methods to award a contract. The primary method, the contract must be awarded to the lowest responsible proposer, so just the lowest bid. If it is determined to utilize the secondary method, is based solely on a point count or high score, and that contract must be awarded to the responsible proposer whose proposal is given the highest score. So there's different elements spelled out in the solicitation package on how those proposals will be evaluated. Cost is one element of that, so it may or may not be awarded, it's not based solely on cost. Another option is to explore any other contract mechanisms within DCA to utilize an existing contract to evaluate non-economic aspects of the study and or utilize an existing DCA contract or DGS master service agreement to conduct the economic impact. Because the public contracting code has many nuances, CSLB and DCA staff will have a lot of back and forth in the coming months to finalize the specific scope of work. However, before we start this process, it is important that we receive board member feedback today on the general parameters you'd like to see addressed. So if there's any questions regarding the process, I'm happy to field those questions now.
Do we have any questions? Okay, Nancy.
Okay, so I'm going to try to, okay, so you're saying 8 to 10 months to hire them, and that's based on the going back and forth?
Yeah, there's a lot of steps that the DGS, the Department of General Services, has put in place for the whole solicitation process. So we're just guesstimating on average, that's typically what it says. In fact, that's what it says in the state contracting manual.
So if there's parts of it where you can actually set a date and a time, we could do that at the least amount of time? Do you know what I mean by that?
You're talking about deliverables?
Yeah.
You can set deliverables, you can set it like a schedule of when you need, yeah, you can dictate what you need and when you need them. The proposers are gonna have to meet those, or they're not going to be,
Right.
yeah. Those are minimum qualifications.
My other question is, you said there's two ways to do the bid, and that was you take the low bid, or you could take the highest score. When you if you were to choose the highest score, is there a way, like if there was a set amount that we'd said, we don't want to exceed this amount of monetary for that contract, could you take the highest score based on that?
You basically set out how you're going to score the elements. You define different elements of how you're going to score the responses.
So you could,
Yeah, and so that way, anyone who is bidding on it, they'll know exactly what they need to do, and they know they need to hit all those elements. So there'll be an evaluation committee once the proposals come in, and they'll look at the qualified proposers, and then they'll start scoring each and every section of those elements. Then the highest score gets awarded the bid. Does that answer your question?
yeah.
It's confusing.
Yeah, so one last question.
Yes.
So would there be like one individual, one staff member assigned to stay on top of this and keep it rolling? I mean, like, is that, because normally I have one point of contact, right?
Typically, there's an executive sponsor.
Yes,
Okay,
And then there's staff
we'll
that.
be on top of it.
Right, and then, we'll put together an evaluation team, once the solicitation goes out, that will evaluate the proposals.
thank you.
Through the chair. So, again, if I may, who establishes the criteria for the scoring?
We are going to, once we have the scope of work.
Mike?
Yeah, once the scope of work is developed and we're drafting the solicitation package, DCA will actually assist us in drafting that. And the evaluation items will be in that package. And those evaluation criteria will also be used in the evaluation process. So there's going to be an evaluation team that will be assigned to evaluate the responses.
Mike, if I could, I think what we would do is we would have an internal team here with our executive
Correct.
staff to work with the Department of Consumer Affairs. And what we would do is we'd look very closely at all of this information that we've received in developing the criteria and what we need to look at. But
Yes.
But that's something the board needs to realize is that if you vote to go this direction, you are trusting staff to put this together.
Yes, that's typically how it's done.
So that means no board members would be involved until a vote or
It's
whatever?
very unusual that a board member would be involved at that level.
Okay.
Typically, it's delegated because of the back and forth. And I think you have some open meeting requirements that would make that very cumbersome. It would really extend your timeline out there.
Yeah, and I've had people do some reports for us, for my job not this, but, and $20,000 really doesn't get you much. I know that. So, and just saying, maybe the government get it done cheaper, but I doubt it. So what I'm getting at that is, you said lowest responsible bidder or a criteria.
Correct.
That whole definition, lowest responsible bidder, I really particularly don't like, because sometimes you get what you pay for on that, and I would, how long as this thing's drawn on, I've been on the board since 2011, I want it done right and get it done and over with. So, yeah, I'd much rather have a scoring criteria.
Point.
I
Note taken.
just have
Good,
a
Sue.
comment. I think what's appropriate, or certainly what happened in the business I was in, is that that Dave's report to us at each board meeting is detailed progress on what has been done. Board participation isn't appropriate or needed in this, but our feedback certainly to Dave during meetings would be that. And so the onus would be on him to ensure all of our comments and concerns are included in the progress they're making with DCA.
Yeah, no, I get all that, but the thing with that is if we add more stuff in as the timeline goes on, the cost will go up. That's the thing, and it will happen, so I'm just saying.
Yeah, Augie.
I think we got a pretty good idea of what we're looking for.
the Ledge Committee's heard tons of testimony. Yeah. Oh, yeah, you were sleeping through half of it, huh? But I think we have a direction, and I don't think anybody's gonna look at this, any consultant's gonna look at this and come in at $20,000. I think it's gonna be closer to the $90,000 or $100,000. But, just a little edification for people who are new to process, maybe David, you could explain as to what DCA's role is in this and why they do this.
Yeah, I think I'll let Tanya, our expert, discuss.
Sure. So really, we're a board under the umbrella of the Department of Consumer Affairs, who actually has the delegated authority from our control agency, which is Department of General Services, is the Department of Consumer Affairs. And so they have the authority to execute the contract and work with the control agency directly. So for purposes of today, what we're really looking at is gathering all the feedback that we can from the board members so we could go back and work with DGS Legal, the Department of Consumer Affairs, and crafting a scope and all the criteria and evaluation criteria that goes into the contracting process to make sure it complies with all of our public contracting codes and all the processes and procedures. So.
So through the DCA process, when you do a contract and they do X, Y, Z, or they're a contractor to do X, Y, Z, but it doesn't finish in the timeline, what's the recourse or whatever? Can they go back for an extra like we do in contracting?
Yeah, there's a specific amendment process that they have to follow. We would have to put in a request to amend the contract for time, and that happens from time to time. You just amend it for time. It had not, deliverable. It's going to take more time, or sometimes money. But yeah, there's this very specific process set out by the Department of General Services that Consumer Affairs follows.
Thank you.
Nancy?
Sorry. So I know this is, you don't know till you get into it, to the exact deliverables here, but I'm gonna assume that this is the most direct, quickest way, if we go this way, to do it.
Yes.
I mean,
If we
I'm just-
find quicker
just
ways.
clarifying that.
Yeah, if we find quicker ways.
Through
That,
the chair, this is also the cleanest.
Yes.
I get that, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, any other questions from the board? Okay, I will be recommending this item be handled with two motions. First is for the board to vote on the legislative committee's motion to hire a consultant, and if the motion carries, to then discuss and make a motion on the general parameters for hiring a consultant. And I'll review the committee's motion. The legislative committee recommends the following: that staff be directed to identify and retain an outside consultant or consultants or expert to consider energy storage systems, information received, perform additional fact-finding as necessary, and provide an analysis regarding ESS installation issues, including safety concerns and the appropriate contractor license classification or classifications to install battery energy storage systems. And that staff provide a timeline at the next meeting. Since this recommendation comes from a committee of the board, it comes to you as a fully formed motion and needs no first or second prior to a vote. There is also a discussion about the scope or parameters of the consultant's work, which we will discuss shortly if the board is inclined to pass the committee's motion. With that, is there any other board comment? Seeing none. Is there any public comment?
Thank you, Board Member Simpson. Eddie Bernacki on behalf of the National Electrical Contractors Association. Unlike in budget issues, sometimes hope and optimism is all we have when we're trying to put together sound public policy. So on behalf of the National Electrical Contractors Association, we would urge this body to move forward with bringing on the consultant in hopes of getting some resolution here and getting us to the end of this process that's been very long and dragged out for our industry. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I've been very quiet today. I'm Phil Vermeulen. One quick question. With all the budget problems we've been hearing about, and why, and I understand it has to be an independent, but why not bill the industries after this is all said and done 50-50 for the cost of this? It seems to me that we're talking about one issue here. Why should the burden go to the whole construction industry on this?
Christie, would you be able to comment on that?
We don't have any authority to do as suggested by the public commenter. And I'm sure the board would love to have legislative authority to do that, but at this point, things come up from time to time, and sometimes it focuses on one area of the industry that we regulate, and sometimes the other, and that's just what happens as issues emerge and things need to be changed and looked at for the board. So at this time, we don't have the authority to do that. The reason this item is being brought to you is because you are responsible for your budget, you and your registrar. So that's why it's being brought to you as a decision point, and why this matter is being discussed so thoroughly, because you do know, as in light of our last budget discussion, that there are issues, but the staff are working to address them.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Microphone?
Hi, I'm Courtney Corda with Corda Solar. My husband and I are small C46 contractors in Contra Costa County, and we've been in business for 12 years. Sorry about my voice, I'm getting over a cold. And I'm glad that you're studying this. I look forward to the recommendations of the report, and I'm hopeful that the consultant will show that C46 contractors have been safe in installing energy storage systems and will be continued to allow to do it. The industry is changing, as you know, and with the power shutoffs that happened in all over the state, but particularly in Contra Costa County, a lot of our customers were hit hard. And it was, for many, it was the first time that our solar customers were facing the irony that they can't use their solar panels when there's a power outage if they're tied to the grid without a battery. So it really sparked a lot of interest. And I had 9 phone calls from our customers wanting to retrofit their systems with batteries. And I haven't told them all yet, but the first one that I told that we're not allowed to install a battery retrofit with an existing customer, even though we are allowed to install new systems with integrated battery storage. My customer was in a state of disbelief. It's pretty hard to find a good contractor that you really trust. And in our case, we have relationships with a lot of these customers going back years. So they just were very disappointed that they couldn't choose us. And I haven't told all the other customers yet that we wouldn't be able to do it. I was hoping to let them down easy by finding a C10 contractor that I could trust, that I felt knew enough about it to be able to be trustworthy to refer to my customers. But so far, of the 5 that I've called, 2 say they're not familiar enough to do it and we're not interested. 2 were too busy to return my calls, and 1, I'm waiting a couple of weeks just to get a quote. So I think there's, at least I know it's a small sample size, it's just my anecdotal information, but at least in Contra Costa County, in my experience, it's very hard to get an electrician to do anything. And it's just a shame for us. It's a business opportunity that as a small business, to be able to do repeat business with a customer that trusts you, and to be able to not be able to do that, it's going to be hard on us. So I'm looking forward to this study, and I hope it will be done in a very unbiased manner, and that the study will also talk to the manufacturers in our industry, because they're putting together robust training that has helped C46 contractors be the true experts in this field. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Yes, Brad Hedmer of the California Solar and Storage Association. We appreciate the board's recognition that something with such big cost implications has to be studied carefully. We have to understand what those costs are. There's been a lot of discussion about it and not an agreement. It's just obvious to me that there are major costs. We represent 500 different companies doing business in solar and storage. About half of them are contractors. And I'm always asking them, how are you doing? I run into them, how's business, what's been going on? And the thing I hear more than anything is, yeah, business is okay, but I can't find people. I'm having a hard time staffing up. It's just not, people aren't available. Whether they're electricians or non-electricians, it's hard to find the staff to run a small business. So clearly, if you restrict the labor pool, that makes costs go up. It's just that obvious. So we can work, with the consultant. I'm happy that you're digging in further to make sure we get it right. It's a little ironic also that this meeting is happening at the same time as there's an event happening right now in Clovis to celebrate the 1,000,000th solar roof. Arnold Schwarzenegger is there, Jerry Brown is there, a big deal to celebrate this huge milestone. It took 13 years to get there. And for storage, we don't have that much time. Prices have not been going down. We're still selling mostly to people with an early adopter mentality. If we want to make this a mainstream technology, prices need to come down, and this proposal would make them go up. So again, we'll be happy to work with a consultant to get the numbers right. In the meantime, the retrofit issue that Ms. Corda described is side by side with this issue, and I think we're going to need to make progress on that as the consultant is studying the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment?
My name is Jim Jenner. I'm a C46. I have my own business here in California. I've been doing solar and storage for about 10 years now. I strongly urge you guys to do the study and look into the facts of this. At least we can all, that way it will stop a lot of the arguing. I've been to the former meetings and listened to all of the testimony, and yes, I won't drone on either. But I urge you to look, at least we have a fair playing field and some real facts to base our decisions on. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none, can you please take the roll?
Johnny Simpson,
Aye.
Kevin Albanese,
Aye.
Frank Altamira,
Aye.
Augie Beltran,
Aye.
David Delatorre. Oh, absent. Dave Diaz,
Yes.
Susan Granzella. Diana Love,
Aye.
Jim Ruane,
Aye.
Nancy Springer,
Yes.
Mary Teichert.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Turn that on. Thank you. Okay, with that, let's go to the second motion. In addition to the foregoing motion, the Legislative Committee recommended that staff provide in general parameters for the potential consultants' work and that those parameters be brought forward for the board's consideration. You will note that staff have provided those suggested parameters on pages 257 and 258 of the meeting materials. I'd like to open it up to board member discussion and take it one suggested parameter at a time. Starting with the first bullet point, which currently reads, battery energy storage systems, BSS, risk hazards, size and complexity considerations with respect to public safety, particularly what harm will be fixed by enacting a regulation, either existing or prospective harm. Do we have any comments from the board?
I got Johnny. What would be interesting to me is to include the term predictive or likelihood of prospective harm. We've heard either the sky's going to fall from one end or there's absolutely no risk of harm. And probably there's some truth to both sides, but I think if the expert or consultant can look at the predictive nature or the likelihood of that harm occurring. We all know that the universe is broad. It's somewhere from 0 to infinity. Sorry, Dave. I think including some likelihood factor, predictive factor would be important in the analysis.
Either, so are you talking about the last, after the last comma there, either existing or prospective harm? Would that
Yeah,
cover
just
what
to
you're saying?
include, either existing or prospective harm and the likelihood or the predictiveness of that prospective harm. I mean, we already know what the actual harm is, but the going forward, to avoid speculation of,
Are you talking about potential harm? Sorry, just for clarification, you're talking about potential harm?
no, because I think we have that in their perspective, and I'm not trying to wordsmith or get cute. I mean, the potential harm is either the whole thing's going to blow up or nothing's going to happen. What I want to know is what's the likelihood of whatever it is. I don't want to just average that out, but the true likelihood as close as we can get it. Does that make sense?
It does make sense to me. So you're talking about saying either existing or prospective harm and the likelihood of either.
Perfect.
Would that make sense to everyone? Everyone okay with that being added?
Didn't you say predictive?
He says, well, this says prospective, prospective harm and the likelihood of either occurring.
Predictive?
Are we good with that?
Predictive. I'm sorry, I'm just not clear what predictive harm is. I know we've talked, like, in terms of public protection, the case law talks about usually
I don't see predictive.
present harm, existing harm, or potential harm, like what possibility harm that would occur. So this predictive harm is kind of a new terminology to me.
Likelihood, the likelihood of the potential harm. We
So
know.
the potential harm and the likelihood.
The likelihood of said potential harm is probably the best, cleanest way.
So we got the right words? Okay. Are there any other board member comments? No. Okay, let's go to the second bullet point, which currently reads, whether the C46 classification should be limited to a building occupancy classification, parenthesis, commercial, residential, et cetera, in parenthesis, or in comma, quote, when installing a battery energy storage system, and if so, what extent / in what way? I have read the regulation for the C46 classification, California Code of Regulations, 832.46, and it reads, a solar contractor installs, modifies, maintains, and repairs thermal and photovoltaic solar systems. A licensee classified in this section shall not undertake or perform building or construction trades, crafts, or skills except when required to install a thermal or photovoltaic solar energy system. Based on the current reading of the regulation, I propose it be amended as follows. Whether a C46 classification should be authorized in regulation to install a battery energy storage system, and if so, what extent and in what way? So do we have any board comment?
Are you,
Seeing that.
that's your proposal?
Yes, that's what I'm proposing.
Gotcha. So that's taking the predicate that they can't now install, that, is it your interpretation that they can't now install it? And we got to, if we think they should, add that to the regulation?
Well, it would replace the bullet point that you have in your package, and it would just see, based on current reading of the regulation, and I read the regulation to
Right.
you, I propose it be amended as follows. So we'll amend that piece as follows. Whether the C46 classification should be authorized in regulation to install a battery storage system, and if so, to what extent and in what way?
Can I suggest that we go with the amendment without referencing the regulations so we get a more comprehensive
Sure.
analysis of whether they should be installing, period, as opposed to in light of the current interpretation, so that you can get information about whether a consultant would give you an opinion about whether there should be standalone, paired, or whatever. That way, you can make decisions about amending or not amending the regulations with a full gamut of analysis.
Sure.
Just keep it
That's
open-ended.
fair, yeah, well, that's fair. Okay, any board comments?
I do.
I guess my only concern with that is it sounds like now they can't do it. We're trying to see if they can do it. And I think history's established that that's been the past practice.
This has nothing to do with what they're doing now.
Just do it.
Okay,
It's just to get
This
an
is moving
opinion about
forward.
whether
Yeah.
they should or shouldn't. And so then you can determine whether you want to amend the regulation based on that recommendation.
Right.
So it's just a matter of getting all the analysis in as opposed to narrowly interpreting it in light of current or past
Okay.
interpretation.
Okay, well, okay.
Johnny?
Any other board comment? Nancy?
So on the last statement you said, I'm sorry, I'm confused there. Did you take out the building occupancy classification, commercial residential, when you reset it?
Yes. So I don't wanna tell a consultant what they have to do. I want the consultant to be able to read and say, this is what I think they should be doing. To be more fair to the consultant, I think.
Okay.
Question. I actually heard it the same way Kevin did it. It sounded like it was a new evaluation. Excuse me, got a cold here. So I wonder if there's a continue to portion of what your first phrase was. Did you say whether they should? Were you kind of saying whether they should continue to?
No, I did not say that. I said, should be an authorized regulation to, let me reread it. Based on current reading of the regulation, and that's their license, I propose it be amended as follows. Whether the C46 classification should be authorized in regulation to install a battery energy storage system, and if so, to what extent and in what way? So their current reading in the rule says that they can do solar. So if a consultant comes back and says they can do battery storage, for instance, that would be added to the regulation, right?
So is it restricting anything they're doing now, the way you
No.
just said it? Okay.
I think that what we were looking at is the part where he starts with whether. That's kind of the parameter that we would be focusing on, not the intro, but the whether they should be authorized in regulation to install. So,
I guess the only, and this will be my last comment on it, and I will put up to a vote, but it sounds as if our interpretation is or has been that the 46 cannot do ESS, and we're asking the consultant to opine on whether they should. That's how I hear it. That's how it sounds to me, but that.
Would my motion change that, or my addition change that?
I understood your addition to start with the term whether
Whether.
and not the introduction part. I mean,
Right.
you're explaining your rationale for why you're recommending it with the introduction, but my understanding was the open-ended question is whether they should be authorized to install, period.
Right.
And then and under what circumstances would be up to the, whether they should, the consultant would answer, and under what circumstances the consultant would answer. So that could be paired, it could be standalone, it could be a variety of different, who knows and we want to give the consultant broad discretion to give their opinion on this issue without focusing them on any particular aspect of installation. That would be my recommendation, so you get a full analysis and complete analysis of the issue.
Okay.
Yeah, nothing we're doing here changes anything what anybody's doing right now. So, just make sure everybody knows that.
And I recognize that. I guess if we're going to change our current interpretation, there needs to be good, solid evidence to do that.
Yeah, that's
We're
not
not
on the
changing.
agenda today. We're just setting the parameters for what the consultant's going to look at. I would put that on another agenda if you want to talk about it, but right now, it's just what are we asking the consultant to examine and give us opinion on? And I recommend you make these topics as broad as possible so we get as much information and analysis from all angles as possible.
So, through the chair. So that's what we came up at the ledge hearing, right? Nothing has changed thus far. So this is just a continuance of exploring and finding out what we should possibly change a code or not. But nothing, to be very clear, because I know at the hearing, a lot of people thought that we were voting to change the code every time we sat down and made a recommendation. Just to be very clear, there is no change to the code or our current interpretation of that code. Just a parameter for the consultant to look at.
Okay. Any other board comment? Seeing none. Okay, let's move on to the third bullet point. It currently reads, applicability of state and national standards and codes to these inquiries. Any board comment? Pretty inane, right? Okay, the fourth bullet point, economic impact analysis of a restriction to the C46 classification. I assume there's no comment on that. Having covered all four general parameters in the board packet materials, are there any suggestions from the board? My suggestion is that we add the following: analyzing knowledge, skills, and training, and costs not to exceed $100,000. So we don't want to just give an open checkbook. Hopefully it'll be less. Hopefully it'll be a lot less. Okay, is there any board comment on those? Seeing none, is there any public comment? Seeing none. At this time, is there a motion to approve the parameters as amended for staff to use as a guideline for identifying and retaining an expert or consultant?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any other board comment? Is there any public comment? Seeing none, Felice, can you call the roll?
Johnny Simpson,
Aye.
Kevin Albanese. Frank Altamira,
Aye.
Augie Beltran, David Delatorre,
Aye.
Dave Diaz,
Yes.
Susan Granzella, Diana Love,
Aye.
Jim Ruane,
Aye.
Nancy Springer,
Yes.
Mary Tykert.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you to the board. It's a very difficult situation, and we've had our committee sitting through hours of testimony, so hopefully this will get us a little closer to resolution. With that, that completes our business for the day. Can I please get a motion to adjourn?
Wait, what, okay. I just wanted to ask one question
Hold on.
before we adjourned.
Okay.
So can I still do that since they already did that? So, and I know everybody wants to leave, but I just need, just for me, I need clarification. So when there was a comment made by Maurice Hare that responsible for our budget. And then in our budget, we went over, and I hate to bring this up again, but that Construction Management Education Act disbursements. I'm just curious, since we're awarded money, did we need to make a motion on that to approve that? Because it's releasing funds?
Well, can I comment on that?
I was confused, so.
Well, I guess the first thing is, there's been a process in place here since 2002 as to how it's been distributed. But in light of that, I've been talking to our legal counsel, Christy Shield, and in the future, we're going to be handling this differently. And so we will be agendizing it. The question is, for these, we don't know if that was distributed. We do know it wasn't put on the agenda today for a board vote. Justin, do you have an update on that?
It was just an information item for today's agenda. The money has not been distributed yet. We're going to sort out some procedural matters, and we may be coming back to you.
Well, then, if that's the case, what we decided yesterday is that we'd put this on the agenda for board vote in March.
Thank you.
Okay, now can we have a motion to adjourn? And a second.
Good.
Have that one too.
Right here. All right.
Any board discussion? Any public comment? Can we take the roll?
Johnny Simpson,
Aye.
Kevin Albanese, Frank Altamira, Augie Beltran, David Delatorre, Dave Diaz, Susan Granzella, Diana Love,
Aye.
Jim Ruane,
Aye.
Nancy Springer, Mary Tykert.
Aye.
We are adjourned.